Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and let's leave no homemade food coloring based sugar sprinkles behind. I have used these in 2 episodes of Dyepot Weekly now. One where we made the sprinkles themselves and looked at them for speckling yarn, which worked great. And then another time where I used it heavier, like I might acid dyes to create more of a speckled variegated colorway, which also worked great. And now, well, I don't really want to store these. So I'm going to combine them all into 1 cup, sort of stir it up. And now we're going to use this mixture. Did all the brown go to the bottom? No, I guess it's kind of distributed. Maybe it stuck to that yellow. And now we're going to use this mixture to dye 100 grams of yarn. The yellow texture was it wasn't wet because it's definitely dry, but it's more oily almost than the other ones. Like it's not as dry and brittle feeling as the blue and the brown were. But all of these sugar sprinkles were made using 1 heaping soup spoon of sugar with 5 drops of Wilton Colorite food coloring. So anyway, let's go get set up to dye some yarn. Today we are going to dye 100 grams of Knit Pick Stroll fingering weight yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and dyes beautifully with food coloring. You need to make sure you pick the right yarn to dye with food coloring. You want it to be protein based, like wool, alpaca, silk. You can do wool acrylic blends, but the colors will end up being a lot more muted because you can't dye acrylic or cellulose fibers like cotton with food coloring. The other things that you will need will be some heat, so we'll be doing this on the stove, some acid, which will be in the form of vinegar, and that's just about it. Here in this full-size catering steam pan, I started with 8 cups of water and 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. And then I have dyed some yarn in here already, but I'm adding the new yarn that we just pre-soaked. And if you'd like to learn more about any of the yarn or other materials that I use in my videos, I do have affiliate links to Knit Picks, Amazon, and sometimes some other companies in the video description. So for one skein, this isn't that low immersion, but we're gonna have fun with our mixture of color. And just to show what I dyed before I combined all the colors, I think the only other thing I want to add is that this is a dedicated dye pan, but I am comfortable using it with food coloring. I just wouldn't ever use it for food or food coloring that I was going to eat. And that looks so cool. Let me zoom you in. So we definitely see multicolored speckles in there, but let me grab a tiny pinch and come in over here where you can see the close-up. So the colors are sticking together a little bit. So I definitely see teal from where I think the yellow and blue are sticking together. Little pops of yellow, some tiny pops of brown on its own. But this looks so cool. Zooming in on another area, and we can go, let's go a little bit heavier overall. I like to use my fingers. They are getting stained. I could use gloves, but I'm not going to today. I would say the blue is the dominant color by far. There's definitely more blue and yellow left over in this mixture than there was the brown. I had the least of that left, and the yellow. But this is beautiful. So from my past experience with these food coloring sprinkles, I know the colors will spread, and I know I'm going to want to add more color to the other side, but I like what is happening. So I have this clump right here. I'm going to put it in. It's going to lead to some spread over there. I'm not going to worry about it. But the pops of some brown with all these heavy colors, man, imagine if this were citric acid instead of sugar. That would be so cool. All right, what I'm not doing is touching it. So I am starting to see some pastel halos, but we've also got heavy speckles, and there's still a fair amount left. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this sit for 5 minutes, and then we will come back flip it and add more yarn to the other side. Since the yarn is spread out in this way in the pan, it's one skein, it's spread really far out, we might not need to flip many times, but we also may decide that that's what we want to do. But ooh, this is pretty. Oof. I mean, I am enjoying speckling with food coloring anyway, but man, ooh, check that out. So this is something that you wouldn't necessarily see with acid dyes, and I think that if we had maybe done this with citric acid, if there was less water in here, then the colors would strike faster. But it's cool that we see speckles and yet this spread. I think that that is fun. And so I'm now going through and we're doing this on the other side. There was definitely a bit of a green read to it, but it's funny how much spread there is, but maybe it's from some that like goes through. It's funny that we don't really see that spread along the surface, but it goes down beneath. And the background of this doesn't really feel white anymore. It definitely feels pastel. Okay, I want to save a tiny bit for the very end. So I've got just a tiny bit left, and we're gonna let this sit for 5 more minutes. I'm just zooming in. I don't know if all these colors are coming through. It still feels almost blown out, but there's like these rivers of green and blue, and the way that they're blending is gorgeous. It's been 5 minutes, and I should add that the heat has been on low this whole time. So we have been applying heat to the yarn, and I mean, I'm really actually happy with the coverage that we have already. I'm glad I saved a little bit of color just in case, but this is beautiful. Okay, I am tapping that into my hand. So in any kind of speckling technique, you really want to have your hands be as dry as possible. That will allow you to not add the dye to your hands and to add it to the yarn. But I think that this is it. I think this is it. This is awesome. It might be easier to appreciate some of this when dry, but these like small patches of color on the pastel backdrop, this is beautiful. Oh man, I haven't played with speckling acid dyes in a while because of, you know, pandemic and kids around and things, but ooh, I am wanting to play. This is gorgeous. Anyway, I'm gonna heat this for 10 minutes. The color is basically all absorbed. I'll heat it for 10 minutes on low, and then we will turn off the heat. I'll set the yarn aside so then we can let it cool completely so I can wash it. Let's wash this beautiful yarn. Again, this yarn looks like it was done with acid dyes. It does not look like a food coloring yarn to me, just because of the number and quality of the speckles. I'm not expecting to see any bleeding in here, but we will be rinsing this yarn more than usual, and I just added some clear dish soap, and that's just because of the sugar. Water should rinse out all of that sugar, and that is what we want to see. So anyway, I will be rinsing this a number of times. Then I'll put the yarn through my spin dryer and hang it up to dry. But if you don't have a spin dryer, you can use a salad spinner. I haven't ever tried using the spin cycle on a washing machine, but in theory, that should work. I might just worry about tangles because a spin dryer has like a lid that I put to keep things from just being loose in the drum. There is no reason why I had to use up these leftover food coloring DIY sugar sprinkles, but I didn't want to leave them behind. I didn't really want to save them for later because I want to explore more colors and more tweaks, like making citric acid sprinkles instead of sugar, and trying this with different types of food coloring, maybe even more liquidy McCormick's or the more gel-like Wilton icing colors. So there are so many possibilities, and I'm so excited to play. This colorway is not like anything I've achieved with food coloring before. I have done speckles, I have done subtle colors, I've even done some beautiful watercolor-like colors, but most of those have been based on liquid. And a big reason why I've been an advocate for acid dyes, for commercial acid dyes, is that with the powders, there's so much more you can do. In addition to, they probably last longer since they were developed for dyeing fiber versus food, but that's aside. In terms of technique and the actual colors you can create, I love using powders. Unfortunately, the one time I've really tried food coloring based powders, outside of say Easter egg dye tablets, but trying powdered food coloring, it just didn't work anywhere near as well as what I'd seen with Kool-Aid. And in Kool-Aid, there's a limitation in the colors you can get, but ooh, this is pretty. You can't buy food coloring sprinkles in colors that are this pigmented, mainly because, well, when you touch them, they stain you. And in general, bakers and people don't want to color the humans who are eating the objects. That tends to be a negative. But, oh man. So I don't recommend necessarily doing this pigmented if you wanted to make some sugar cookies. But hey, for yarn, we might be able to push it further. Now, I've mentioned in some of these videos that the texture of the yellow, I think the yellow is more viscous, a little more, I don't know if there's an oil in there, but it doesn't feel as dry and therefore wasn't as easy to sprinkle with. So some colors will work better to like increase the pigmentation better than others depending on their consistency. So that's something to keep in mind. But we're going to explore all of this more. So subscribe and have your notifications on so you don't miss another video. But man, I'm so happy to have some other, like, this is something that I've suggested to people, but I hadn't tried, and I don't know why it took me so long. I don't. If you want to support the channel beyond just watching the videos, which is the biggest way you can support things, by the way, but I do have some links in the video description to my Etsy shop. I have a Patreon, and I even have some limited merch over on Zazzle. So you can find that all in places where you can find me on social media and stuff, all in the video description. Man, I want to go make more sprinkles. And I think that might be what I'm going to do later today. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.